Like a lot of overheated Texans, my family and I spent quite a bit of time at the pool every summer. And it was on one particularly scorching July day recently when I took my two kids, MG and Lulu, to the pool. We ran into a little boy there that MG used to go to preschool with. So I swam over to him and I said, "Hey, Seamus, it's me, MG's mom. He's over there by the water slide. You should go play with them." Seamus looked at me a little confused and he said, "Who's MG?" And I realized, it had been a minute since we'd seen this kid. He maybe hasn't gotten the memo. So I made sure to break it down for him in language that literally anyone, even a child, could understand. And I said, "Well, Seamus, do you remember Gracie from preschool? Gracie's a boy now, and his new name is MG. He's over there by the water slide. You should go play with him." Y'all, without skipping a beat, that child waved goodbye to his mama, swam off to the deep end, and played with my baby the rest of the day. Do you know why? They did not care what was underneath that swimsuit. All they cared about was who could hold their breath the longest or make the coolest splash off of the diving board. MG is like any other second grader in America today. He loves basketball, he loves Minecraft, he loves bacon. He says he doesn't like his little sister, but I know he secretly adores her. Why are we making a big deal about this? Why are we letting our heads get in the way of our hearts? Why can't we be a little more like Seamus? 20 years ago, you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who would speak publicly about transgender issues, let alone talk about their transgender 8-year-old. But my hope is that 20 years from now, this type of talk is going to be so unremarkable that no one's going to take time out of their day to come hear some mama brag on her kid for the next 15 minutes. But let's face it, today we have a problem on our hands. The National Center for Transgender Equality found in 2014 that an astounding 41% of transgender kids, just like my baby, attempt suicide. The reason? They feel unaccepted, unsupported, and unloved. Think about that. More than 2 in 5 transgender kids. Now, the national average is somewhere closer to 4%, and don't get me wrong, any life lost to suicide is tragic. But when 41% of transgender kids, like my son, are attempting suicide, we have a moral obligation to do something. That is on us. And that is why I'm here today. So before I even knew I was pregnant with MG, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. I looked down into my womb, and from within there was a little baby boy staring back up at me. And from within the womb, he spoke to me so clearly. He said, "Mom, I'm here. I'm fine, and it's going to be okay." I woke up elated. We had been trying to start a family. And for the next 9 months, I firmly believed I was having a boy. Call it a mother's intuition. I don't know how else to describe it. So you can imagine my surprise when upon his birth, the midwife said, "It's a girl." What? I'm supposed to be the intuitive one. Okay. I looked twice. No lie, I looked twice before I believed them. Sure enough, there was a girl. But I wasn't disappointed. 10 fingers and 10 toes. It is every parent's dream. So I dressed this child like a girl. We had the matching Mary Janes. We had the butterfly wings, the pearl necklaces, the tiaras, the matching Mommy and Me outfits. He was adorable, y'all, just adorable, adorable. And I dressed him this way every day until about the age of 2.5, when he said, "Mom, I actually like Spider-Man, and I'm a boy." Now, I think the feminist in me maybe delayed this transition a bit for him, because the feminist in me recognized that what he was seeing in the commercials was not the girliness that he identified with. So I said, "Baby, listen, just because you are not a glitter-bombed sex kitten who likes Bratz dolls and My Little Ponies does not make you any less a girl. Sweetheart, let's redefine girly together. Redefining girly was a term that I had heard from CEO Melissa Atkins-Wardy, and I was hell-bent on redefining girly. I said, baby, you can be a cool girl. You could be a science girl. You could be a sporty girl. Honey, you can be anything you want to be, but you, my child, are a girl. Now, we let him wear his Spider-Man t-shirts and his Star Wars tennies, and everything was fine until about the age of 4.5. When we're pulling into the driveway, and from the back seat of our minivan, my daughter asks me, Mommy, do you think scientists can turn me into a boy? What do you do with that? What do you do with that? So I said, honey, is that something you want to do? And he looked at me, and he nodded. He was sincere. So we had a choice to make. You know, on the one hand, do I continue to encourage him to redefine girly, to identify as a tomboy? I mean, let's be honest. Even tomboys know they're girls. I wanted my child to define himself from the inside out, not the outside in. But on the other hand, if I encourage him and allow him to dress and act like a boy in public, was I setting him up for a life of bullying, discrimination, or worse? It is not easy being transgender. I didn't know what the right answer was, but I was not giving up. So school started. He started kindergarten at a public school, and he wore his cool clothes, and he got that short haircut he always wanted, and he went by Gracie, lined up in the girls' line, and when it was time to go to the bathroom. But I noticed about halfway through first grade, something had changed. I would notice the way that this child would bolt, y'all, just bolt to the bathroom after school, unable to hold his bladder a moment longer. He no longer felt comfortable using the girls' bathroom at school, but he wasn't sure if he was allowed to use the boys' bathroom either. As a result, he had been doing a pee-pee dance all day at school. He couldn't sit still. His grades were slipping. There were emotional outbursts at home. There were disciplinary actions at school. Something was off. So I sat him down. I said, baby, what's going on? Something's changed with you. And what he told me changed everything and changed nothing at all, because he is still the same child. The first thing he said was, Mom, I don't want to be called Gracie anymore. I want to be MG, and I will be very honest. That has been the hardest part for me as his mom, because there's a lot of meaning and significance behind his name. Mary Grace. Mary Grace, a name so full of meaning and family history. It's been hard for me just to call him MG. And don't get me wrong, he's not just MG, he's my MG. And those two letters together are so significant, but separately, they feel so empty. The next thing he said was, Mom, I don't want to use the girls' bathroom anymore. And I said, fine, baby, we will find a solution. That's easy. But the last thing he said, most importantly, was, Mom, I'm a boy. I want you to call me a boy. And then he paused, and he looked at me with those big brown eyes. And there was some fear, some hesitation, and he said, Mom, is that okay? Can I be a boy? And I looked right back at that sweet child of mine who was just as miraculous and amazing in that moment as he was on the day of his birth. And I said, baby, you can be anything you want to be, and I will always love you. Now, it's at this point in our story when I'm usually asked a million questions. So let me hit on the top 3 in the interest of time. The first question is, what happens when you get to puberty? The next question is, how has the support been among your community? And the last question, most importantly, is what can I do to help? And thank you for asking. So the first question, puberty. Let me just say, puberty is not a cakewalk for anybody. It does not matter if you're transgender or cisgender, it's pretty much gonna suck. Fortunately, transgender kids have an opportunity to take puberty blockers. So essentially what happens is at the onset of puberty, or ideally right before, you administer these puberty suppressants to these kids, which allows their minds a few more years to develop ahead of their bodies. If at the age of 14, 15, 16 years old, these kids decide, I would like to live in the body in which I was born, then you simply remove the puberty blockers. If, however, the child decides that they would like to transition into a body that they feel more comfortable in, you remove the puberty blockers and administer either estrogen or testosterone. They would develop the same secondary sex characteristics as anyone else experiencing puberty with estrogen or testosterone, whether it's breasts or facial hair, okay? Now, as for gender affirmation surgery, aka sex reassignment surgery, that may or may not be a part of the equation. But quite frankly, it does not change at all who they are inside. It's none of our business. I wouldn't ask you what your genitals look like. You wouldn't ask me what my genitals look like. Please do not ask that of transgender people. Let's do better. Now, before you say that this is just a phase, may I remind you that this perfect human being has told me from the age of 2, y'all, from within the womb, he told me he was a boy. The day after Halloween, my child stopped being a ninja zombie, but he did not stop being a boy. This is not a phase, this is his real life, and we will honor that. The next question, what has the support been like among your community? I will say, surprisingly amazing. How could you possibly hate on this kid? How could you discriminate against him? He is amazing. He is amazing. My husband is on board, his teachers, his grandparents, our church. The support has been fantastic. Now, there have been some people who have blocked me on Facebook, and I noticed that there's a couple people that don't come around much anymore. But do I miss them? No. This is not a popularity contest. This is about doing what's right for my child. The support has been fantastic. Lastly, what can I do to help? Thank you for asking. The first thing is please feel free to tell your friends about my family. I mean, there's not a lot of formalized support groups out there. There's not a lot of children's literature out there yet. MG is really one of the first generations of kids in this country who can grow up in his authentic self. People are not talking about this, and as a result, it's really easy to make snap judgments and discriminate against an entire group of people that we know nothing about. Parents and families need to know that they are not alone. My family is not remarkable. We are not. This is happening every day. So please tell your friends about this talk, share our story, let them know that their kid is just as amazing as MG is. The next thing is advocate. Advocate. I am standing here from a place of privilege. I'm a white, middle-class, married, college-educated American woman. I have a lot of privilege. Now, I can advocate far better than MG can. He can't talk to his teachers and his school board the way that I can. Likewise, it's important to advocate for your transgender colleagues and peers. They may not feel comfortable speaking about this because doing so might expose them. It might out them. They could lose their job. They could lose where they live. There could be violent attacks against them. It is not easy being transgender. If you notice someone, maybe even yourself, falling into that gender normative stereotype of blue is for boys and pink is for girls, call them out on that, because it's that seemingly innocuous language that boxes us into this gender binary rather than allowing us the opportunity to fully explore the full spectrum of gender identity and pioneer that space between. So challenge your own assumptions, call your friends out, and advocate. Lastly, vote. Make sure you are voting for officials at the local, the state, and the national level who will fight for equality for all. Because discriminatory legislation is state-sanctioned bullying, and it's not okay. If you can't find a politician who will speak to these issues, consider running for office yourself. Clearly, any idiot can do it. You've got no excuse. You can do it, and we can do it together. Look, sometimes we just need to take a step back. Sometimes we let our heads get in the way of our hearts, and we overcomplicate things. But the simple truth is this: it's not hard to love your child. It is not hard to love your child. But it can be so hard sometimes to understand them. I'm not a perfect mom, but I'm doing my best, and I challenge you to do your best too. We need to change this world for the better, because 41% of children, like my son, are so broken from our reaction that they consider taking their own lives. We must do better. We must fight for them. We must advocate for them. We must lift them up, and y'all, most importantly, we must love these children every day, unconditionally. Thank you.